Hello everybody and welcome back to another video on the Currency Keeps channel. Today we're going to be talking about the seeded Liberty dollar. The seeded Liberty dollar was a dollar coin struck by the United States Mint from 1840 to 1873 and designed by its chief engraver Christian Gobrecht. It was the last silver coin of that denomination to be struck before the passage of the Coinage Act of 1873, which temporarily ended production of the silver dollar for American commerce. The coin's obverse is based on that of the Gobrecht dollar, which had been minted experimentally from 1836 to 1839. However, the soaring eagle used on the reverse of the Gobrecht dollar was not used. Instead, the United States Mint used an eagle based on a design by late Mint chief engraver John Reich, first utilized on coins in 1807. The mass is 26.73 grams, the diameter is 38.1 millimeters, the edge is reeded, and the composition is 90% silver, 10% copper. That's 0.773 troy ounces. The mint marks include O for New Orleans Mint, S for San Francisco Mint, CC for Carson City Mint, located beneath the eagle on the reverse. The Philadelphia Mint also minted these coins with no mint mark. The seeded Liberty dollars were initially struck only at the Philadelphia Mint. In 1846, production began at the New Orleans facility. In the late 1840s, the price of silver increased relative to gold because of the increase in supply of the latter caused by the California gold rush. This led to the hoarding, export, and melting of American silver coins. The Coinage Act of 1853 decreased the weight of all silver coins of 5 cents or higher, except for the dollar, but also required the supplemental payment of those wishing their bullion struck into dollar coins. As little silver was being presented to the U.S. Mint at the time, production remained low. In the final years of the series, there was more silver produced in the U.S., and mintages increased. In 1866, In God We Trust was added to the dollar, following its introduction to United States coinage earlier in that decade. Seeded Liberty dollar production was halted by the Coinage Act of 1873, which authorized the trade dollar for use in foreign commerce. Representatives of silver interests were unhappy when the metal's price dropped again in the mid-1870s. And after the passage of the Bland-Allison Act in 1878, production resumed with the Morgan dollar. In 1835, newly appointed Mint Director Robert M. Patterson engaged artists Tidden Peel and Thomas Sully to create new designs for American coinage. In an August 1, 1835 letter, Patterson proposed that Sully create an obverse design consulting of Liberty seated on a boulder, holding a liberty pole in her right hand, topped by a pileus, the headgear given by the Romans to an emancipated slave. He also asked Sully to create a reverse design consisting of a flying eagle rising in flight. Patterson requested that the bird appear natural. He criticized the eagle's designs then in use on the nation's coinage as being unnatural, primarily because of the shield placed on the eagle's breast. Mint chief engraver William Neese prepared a sketch based on Patterson's conception, but suffered a stroke, leaving him partially paralyzed, later in 1835. Christian Gobrecht was hired at the Mint as a draftsman, die sinker, and assistant engraver to Neese. Gobrecht performed much of the engraving work for the Mint until Neese's death in 1840, when Gobrecht was appointed chief engraver. Prior to full-scale production of the dollar coin in 1840, Patterson reviewed the designs then in use, including the Gobrecht dollars. The director opted to replace Gobrecht's soaring eagle reverse with the left-facing bald eagle based on the design by former Mint engraver John Reich, a design first used on the silver and gold coinage in 1807. Although the reverse for the dollar was probably selected to match that of the quarter and half dollar, it is not known why the flying eagle design was not used for the lower denominations in the first place. Numismatic historian Walter Breen speculates that a treasury official might have preferred the Reich design. The obverse of the Gobrecht dollar was in high relief, but Mint officials felt that this should be lowered for the new coin, which was to be struck in much larger quantities. Patterson hired Robert Ball Hughes, a Philadelphia artist, to modify the design. As part of Hughes' modifications, Liberty's head was enlarged, the drapery was thickened, and the relief was lowered overall. 13 stars were also included on the obverse. On the Gobrick dollar, with its high relief, the depiction of Liberty appears like a statue on a plinth. The flattered seated Liberty decreased high relief appears more like an engraving. A small production run of 12,500 was minted in July 1840 to allow bullion depositors to become familiar with the new coins before having their silver struck into dollars. The process of bringing the new coin to public hands was made easier by a congressional authorization in 1837 for a fund that allowed the mint a float, permitting it to give depositors payment in coin without waiting for their metal to go through the minting process. Bullion producers began depositing the silver required to initiate heavier production later in 1840. 41,000 pieces were minted in November, followed by a mintage of 7,505 in December. Deposits increased the following year, which saw a mintage of 173,000 pieces. All coins were produced at the Philadelphia Mint until 1846, when 59,000 were struck at the new mint in New Orleans. Production at the New Orleans Mint was disrupted after 1860 by the Civil War. It did not strike silver dollars again until 1879 after the end of the Seated Liberty series. After the outbreak of the war in 1861, inflationary greenbacks were introduced, and precious metal coins vanished from circulation. In November 1861, Reverend M.R. Watkinson suggested in a letter that some sort of religious motto should be placed on American coinage following the outbreak of the Civil War. In an October 21, 1863 report to Treasury Secretary Salmon P. Chase, Pollock expressed his own desire to add a religious motto to American coins. The mint began producing patterns bearing various mottos, including God Our Trust and In God We Trust. The latter was ultimately selected, and its first use was on the 2-cent piece in 1864. The following year, a law was passed allowing the Treasury to place the motto upon any coin at its discretion. The motto was placed on the silver dollar as well as various other silver, gold, and base metal coins in 1866. The Seated Liberty dollar was the first coin to be struck at the Carson City Mint. The first to be issued were 2,303 pieces paid to a Mr. A. Wright on February 11, 1870. The dollar was struck at Carson City from 1870 to 1873, with the largest mintage of 11,758 in 1870. The largest quantity struck at any mint was in 1872 at Philadelphia, with 1,105,500, though the mintage in 1871 had also exceeded 1,000,000. Considerable private melting in the early years of the series makes many dates rare. More melting took place when large quantities that had accumulated at the New York Sub-Treasury were sent to Philadelphia in 1861 and 1862 for restriking into smaller denominations. R.S. Yeoman's 2014 edition of A Guidebook of United States Coins lists no Seated Liberty dollar in collectible condition, very good or better, at less than $280. The key dates of the series include the 1866 variety, which lacks the motto In God We Trust, of which there are only 2 known. One sold at auction in 2005 for $1,207,500. Another rarity is the 1870 struck at San Francisco, 1870S, of which the mintage is not known as their striking was not recorded in that mint's records. Those records indicate that in May 1870, the San Francisco Mint returned $2 reverse dies to Philadelphia as mistakenly sent without mint mark, and received 2 proper replacements. There is no record of any 1870 dated obverse dies for that dollar being sent to San Francisco. Nevertheless, the coin exists. Walter Breen, writing in 1988, lists 12 examples known, which he speculates may have been presentation pieces, meant to be inserted in a cornerstone. One sold at auction for $1,092,500 in 2003. A similar mystery attends the 1873 S, which, despite the stated mintage of 700, is not known to exist. Two of the pieces were routinely sent to Philadelphia for examination at the 1874 meeting of the United States Assay Commission, but apparently were not preserved. Breen suggests that the remaining mintage may have been melted along with obsolete silver coins. Another great part of United States coinage history. That's going to wrap it up for this video. If you enjoyed, be sure to like and catch us on the next video for some more currency you should keep.